everyone, this is Celeste Miller, Statewide Kinship Care Legal Aid Coordinator, and this is the second video that I am making. This is for kinship caregivers, and it is an overview of emergency minor guardianships in the state of Washington. So the last video that I made was for minor guardianships in general, the new law in Washington, and I mentioned that I would make a more detailed one specifically about emergency minor guardianships. So I'm recording this on February 2nd, 2021, and here we go. This slide might look familiar. I'm planning to include it on every video that I make, just so people who don't start at the beginning will know who I am. I'm Celeste. I started in this position in September 2019, and I will leave the slide up for a few seconds. You can always pause if you want to know the rest of the information. And I'm also keeping 2 more slides always on my videos for everyone's reference. These are what do I do? I create resources for attorneys, and I create resources for non-attorneys. I work with volunteer lawyer programs to help set up more legal help for kinship caregivers, and I work with kinship navigators in the state of Washington as well. What I do not do is I can't represent individual clients, so I wouldn't be able to take someone's case and go to court and help them get a guardianship. I can send resources and potentially referrals and try to help people in that way. Okay. This video, like I said, is about emergency guardianships, and what I'm planning to cover includes how to file one, who can file an emergency guardianship, who you must give notice to, how long it takes, where to find the forms. That's courts.wa.gov/forms, and also how long it should take, how long the emergency guardianship lasts, how it's different from a full minor guardianship, and if it can be connected together with a full minor guardianship. Oops. Okay, so as you may know, the minor guardianship law, which includes emergency guardianships, is very new. It just went into effect on January 1st, 2021. You can file one of these cases. The law is in effect. You cannot file a non-parent custody case anymore. These, the full guardianships and the emergency guardianships have replaced non-parent custody. There is more on my other video about what to do if you still have an open non-parent custody case. There are forms, as I mentioned, on the Washington Court Forms website. There are packets, useful packets on washingtonlawhelp.com or .org. And there's also a free training if you are going to become a guardian or hoping to become a guardian, and that is at the Administrative Office of the Courts website, specifically under Office of Public Guardianships. Okay, jumping into the emergency minor guardianships. Who can file includes the person who wants to be the emergency guardian, a youth who wants or needs an emergency guardian can file on their own, and a person interested in the minor's welfare. So that could be the person who wants to be the emergency guardian, or it could be a person who thinks the child needs an emergency guardian, but they're proposing someone else to be that emergency guardian. How much does it cost? There is no filing fee if you are related. And when I say you, I mean the person who's considering filing one of these emergency guardianship petitions. If you are related to the child, there's no filing fee. If you're not related by blood or by law, then there is a filing fee. In King County, it's $240. And it's possible that it's similar or the same in counties around the state. Okay, you may recall that in a regular minor guardianship, there are a lot of people who you have to serve the papers to. In emergency minor guardianships, it's a smaller list. So you must give reasonable notice of the day, the time, and the place of the hearing, and you must give that notice to the following people: the parents of the child, any attorney for the parent or for the child if they have one. They may not have one. If there's a full guardianship proceeding already started, then they might have an attorney. If they do, then you have to give the papers to their attorney. Also, you have to give notice to the child if they are over 12 and anyone else who currently has custody of the child. So if you're filing this and the child's not in your custody and they're not in their parents' custody, they're living with someone else, you have to give the notice that you're doing this emergency guardianship case to that person as well. And then the law says that you also have to give notice to any other person the court determines. So you won't find that out until a judge tells you you have to send the papers to somebody, and then you do what they say. Okay, so reasonable notice, that is different from personal service. I just want to make sure to note that, because as many of you probably know, personal service is when someone besides you has to give the papers to the other people involved in the court case. So reasonable notice most likely is interpreted as sending them the papers in the mail, or potentially emailing them if you have proof that you email with them regularly, and they will probably get the email. To be safe, you would do mailing though. Okay. In terms of figuring out who you do have to give notice to for these emergency guardianships, there is a worksheet on the form. There is a special form called Notice of Hearing about an Emergency Guardianship Petition, and it's different from the regular full guardianship petition forms. So when you go to courts.wa.gov/forms and you look under minor guardianship, make sure you go through and make sure that you are getting the free forms or emergency guardianship. And this is just a worksheet to help you figure out who you need to notify that you are filing an emergency guardianship. Okay, in emergency guardianship, do the parents get a free court-appointed attorney? If there's no other guardianship case pending, they do not, and neither does the child. These emergency guardianships are supposed to only last 60 days, and the parents, the idea is that the parents' rights are not being infringed on as much as they are in a full guardianship when the guardian is asking for custody without an end date. So in an emergency guardianship, it only lasts 60 days. It can be extended once for 60 more days, or it can be combined with a full guardianship and then a full guardianship will be decided after that. So that's a long way of saying that if you only have an emergency guardianship going, the parents will not be appointed an attorney, neither will the child. But they may have an attorney already if there's another case going on at the same time. Okay, I kind of talked about this already with the last slide. So in a regular full guardianship, the child may be able to have an attorney appointed to them or a court visitor appointed to them. In an emergency guardianship by itself, those options aren't in the law. So again, it's similar to the parents. If you already have a full guardianship started, but you need emergency custody before it's decided, then the child and the parents may already have lawyers. Then you'll have to serve them the papers. How long does an emergency guardianship last? So under the law, these last 60 days. There is an option to extend the emergency guardianship for 60 more days, and if the court thinks that that is necessary, but you can only do that one time. The only way to have an emergency guardianship not end would be if you got a full minor guardianship decided before the emergency guardianship was over. So the law does say that if you have an emergency guardianship and you need to file a full guardianship and be guardian for longer than 60 days, then when you file the full guardianship, you can combine it with the emergency guardianship. And then the emergency guardianship will last until you have your hearing where the court decides if you're going to be approved as a full guardian. So those are the ways that emergency guardianships will end, by the time running out or by you becoming a guardian full-time. Not full-time, but for longer than just the emergency timeline. Okay. How to get emergency guardianship of a child. So the law says that you must show that the child needs an emergency guardian in order to prevent substantial harm to the child's health, safety, or welfare. And you have to show that no other person has the authority and the willingness to act in the circumstances. So what does that mean? It really depends on individual situations. The information that you need to think about includes where is the child staying? What is it like there? Is it dangerous? Who is caring for the child, if anyone? What's going on with them, with their parents, with their legal guardian? Where are the parents and legal guardians? It's all very specific to your situation, and you want to get as much information as you can onto the paperwork to show the judge that an emergency guardianship is necessary. So how long does it take to become an emergency guardian? It is faster than a regular minor guardianship. When you file the emergency guardianship petition, there will be a hearing set. Sometimes you set it or the court might set it for you. It should be about 2 weeks after you file the case. This might vary a little bit depending on which county you live in. And then at your hearing date, the parents and the other people that you gave the paperwork to have the opportunity to come tell their version of the story, and the judge will decide if you will be appointed as the emergency guardian. So this is a much faster turnaround than a full guardianship. But remember that this also is not supposed to be permanent. It's a short-term guardianship. So that's the general length of time that it takes to become an emergency guardian. But if there is a very serious, even more emergent situation, it can be done faster. And I'm going to talk about that on the next slide. There is something called immediate emergency custody. So instead of filing the petition, sending the paperwork to the other parties, and then having a hearing 2 weeks later, this one is called immediate emergency custody because you would file the paperwork and the same day you would ask for custody and guardianship immediately. You have to be able to explain to the court that it would be dangerous for the child to wait for the 2 weeks, and it would be dangerous for the child to wait to make this decision after the parents find out that you are applying for emergency guardianship. So these won't be approved in every situation, but if you have a situation where you believe that it will be dangerous to the child's health, safety, or welfare if you have to wait any amount of time between filing your case and getting a court decision, then you have to fill out the forms. A specific form is the motion for immediate order, which is in the same section of the Washington Court's website as the petition for an emergency guardianship. So you fill out the petition and this form for the immediate order. And you put all the information in there that makes you believe that it would be dangerous to the child if you weren't granted custody immediately. To do this, you take the paperwork to the walk-in courtroom, which is called the ex parte courtroom. Many counties now have a way to do this online without going to the courthouse because of the pandemic. So it's important to check your county's website for the court and look for their ex parte information on their website about how to do this. If you go in and you show your paperwork or you do it online, if the judge approves your paperwork, then in your request, you would get emergency custody that day, but you still have to let the parents know about the decision within 48 hours after it got decided. Then there will be a hearing within 5 days after the immediate request. So you get immediate custody, then 5 days later, there's a hearing where the parents can come. The judge will decide if your emergency guardianship for 60 days will be approved. So that's kind of two different ways to get emergency guardianship. The first one is emergency, but not as extreme emergency, I guess you could call it. And then if there is I need immediate emergency custody today, that there is a way to ask for that too. I do plan to make more videos where I show the court forms and how to fill them out. Those won't be legal advice, but they will be just discussing where to put information and which forms to fill out at which time. So stay tuned for those. In terms of the parents getting custody back, because the emergency guardianships are meant to be short-term, there isn't a process for the parents to file something to ask for the guardianship to be canceled. The law does say that a judge can remove an emergency guardian at any time. So time will tell if the courts in Washington set up a process for this. Mainly the way that these emergency guardianships will end and parents will get custody back is either if the deadline runs out and there was no full minor guardianship case filed, then the guardianship ends, the emergency guardianship ends, and the child would go back to the parents. Does the Indian Child Welfare Act apply? Yes. So just like in the other video about full minor guardianships, this is a law that basically says that if there is a case involving changing where a child lives, and the child may be a member of a tribe or may be eligible to become a member of a tribe, then the tribe needs to be notified. And there is a place on the petition for emergency guardianship for you to fill out information about this and about whether the child could be a member of a tribe or not, and if so, whether you are sending paperwork to the tribe. Okay, in emergency guardianships, can parents have visits and could you request child support? Technically, yes. When you fill out the emergency guardianship petition, there is a section to write in what type of visits you are proposing that the parents have during your short-term guardianship. Same thing with the child support. So that part of that petition looks very similar to the full minor guardianship petition, in which you can also request a visit schedule and child support. In terms of getting a protection order or a restraining order, it is the same as with the full minor guardianship. When you fill out the petition for emergency guardianship, there is a section for requesting a restraining order. If you want to request a domestic violence protection order, you have to file different paperwork that is specific to the domestic violence protection order case. And then you would link the protection order case with the emergency guardianship case. So that would be if you needed more protection than emergency guardianship gets you. Excuse me. Now, if you got emergency guardianship and you're thinking, okay, now I'm going to file for regular minor guardianship, are you guaranteed to get that approved as well? No. It's important to know that the law says that being approved for an emergency guardianship is different from being approved for a full guardianship, and that there are different things that you have to prove to become a guardian as opposed to becoming an emergency guardian. So it doesn't mean that you won't be approved. It just means that it's not a guarantee. It's not a promise. If you file a regular guardianship and you say, I should be approved for this because I was approved as an emergency guardian, and that's your only evidence, that will not work. So you have to make sure that you have the situation and evidence to show that the situation is something that fits for a minor guardianship. And if you're asking for emergency, then you need the situation and evidence of the situation that would approve you for an emergency guardianship. So in the video about minor guardianships, there is more detail on the differences between what to prove for that versus what to prove for one of these. One of the major differences is that you have to have stronger evidence for the minor guardianship because it's longer and it's open-ended. So you really have to show and convince the judge at a higher level that this child should be, not in their parents' custody. Okay, that's the end of the emergency guardianship overview. And stay tuned for videos about the forms and how to fill them out. And thank you very much for watching. Feel free to put comments under this video or under my other video about what was helpful, what else you would like to hear about, and I look forward to hearing those. Thank you.